The desert doesn't care about you. That's the first thing you learn out here, not from anyone telling you, but from the land itself, which is indifferent in a way that cities never are. No ambient noise, no softening, just rock and sky and the particular silence of a place that has been doing exactly what it wants for 400 million years and will continue to do, so long after you've packed up your samples and gone home. I'd loved that about fieldwork since my first research trip at 23. The indifference was clarifying. Out here, the only thing that mattered was the work, the reading of rock, the patience of observation, the slow accumulation of data that might eventually tell you something true about how the earth had broken and shifted and remade itself over time. I was 37 now. I still loved the indifference. I just hadn't accounted for Cal. He was already at camp. When my team arrived, sitting on a cooler, outside the supply tent, reading something, not looking up until our vehicles stopped, the research station had assigned him to us for the 6-week project. Wilderness first responder, camp medic, the person responsible for keeping 4 geologists alive in a remote location, with no cell service and a medical facility 4 hours away. He was ex-military. You could tell not from anything he said, but from the way he held himself, economical, unhurried, alert without appearing to be. He shook hands with each of us in turn, asked 2 practical questions about medical histories, and went back to what he was reading. My colleague James whispered, "Friendly." "He's not here to be friendly," I said. "He's here to keep us alive." Cal looked up from his book at that briefly and met my eyes. Something in his expression shifted, a small recalibration, like he'd expected one thing and gotten another. "Dr. Reyes," he said. Not a question. He'd done his reading too. "Cal," I said. His file had said Calvin, but he'd introduced himself as Cal, and I filed that away the way I filed everything, carefully, for later. He nodded once and went back to his book. I told myself that was fine. I hurt my back on day 3. In my defense, the sample was important, a section of exposed, fault scarp that showed 3 distinct displacement events, the kind of find that makes a 6-week project worth the funding. And I'd been so focused on getting to it that I'd hauled my equipment up a rocky slope without thinking about the angle or my footing or the fact that my pack weighed 30 pounds. I felt it immediately, not the sharp pain of something serious. I'd had that once, years ago, and knew the difference, but the deep, grinding protest of muscles that had been asked to do something they hadn't been warned about. I sat down on a rock and breathed through it and tried to calculate how long I could manage before telling anyone. Cal appeared 40 minutes later, which I later learned was because James had radioed him the second he saw my face. He crouched in front of me without ceremony and said, "Where?" "Lower back, left side," I said. "It's not serious." "I'll tell you if it's serious," he said, which was not rude exactly, just precise in a way I found unexpectedly steadying. He moved around behind me and his hands came to my lower back. Professional, systematic, pressing carefully along the muscle groups to assess. "Tell me when it changes." "There," I said. "Yeah," he said. "Muscle strain, not the disc." He pressed again, gently, feeling something I couldn't name. "You'll need treatment twice a day, morning and evening." I turned to look at him over my shoulder. "For 6 weeks?" "Until it resolves," he said. "Could be 2 weeks. Could be 4. He held my gaze steadily. "Unless you'd rather not be able to walk by week 3. I turned back around. "Fine," I said. Twice a day, every day, in the medical tent. He was methodical and careful and completely impersonal, which I respected and found, after the first week, increasingly difficult to reciprocate. His hands knew my back the way I knew my field sites, thoroughly, from repeated attention, understanding where the tension lived and how it shifted day to day. He adjusted his approach without being asked, pressure firmer on bad days, lighter when I came in already worn down from hours in the field. He didn't talk much during the sessions. Neither did I at first. But the desert evenings were long and the camp was small and somewhere around. Day 8. We started talking at the camp stove while dinner cooked. Just the 2 of us. James and the others already in their tents with their data and their laptops. Quiet conversations that started as practical, weather, logistics, the next day's sights, and slowly became something else. He asked good questions. Not the polite kind, not the kind designed to fill silence, but the kind that suggested he'd been paying attention to something. "You said 3 days ago and had been thinking about it since." One evening he asked, "What are you actually looking for out here?" I had a professional answer ready. Fault displacement patterns, seismic history, data for a long-term regional study. I started giving it and then stopped. Because he was looking at me the way he looked at everything, with complete and undefended attention, and the professional answer felt dishonest in the face of it. Evidence that things can break completely and still hold, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Geology or something else, he said. Both, I said. Probably. He nodded, slow, like he was filing that away. What broke? I looked at the camp stove. A marriage, I said, and the version of myself I'd built inside it. I thought I knew how much pressure I could take. I paused. Turns out I didn't know the geology as well as I thought. He didn't say he was sorry. I was grateful. What does it look like? He said. When the earth breaks and still holds? Fault lines, I said. The break is permanent. You can always see where it happened. But the structure reorganizes around it. New patterns. Different but stable. I looked at him. Sometimes stronger depending on the rock. He was looking at the fire. I like that, he said quietly. Week 3, day 4. The site I needed was high. A rock face that required a rope assist to access safely. The kind of thing I'd done dozens of times. But not with a compromised back and not alone. Cal had looked at my field plan the night before and said, without discussion, that he was coming. We climbed in the early morning before the heat built, Cal above me on the rope, talking me up the face with the same calm practicality he brought to everything. At one point, the ledge I needed was just out of reach and he came down, beside me, both of us on the face. His chest solid at my back, one arm bracing across my ribs while I reached for the sample. Got it? He said close to my ear. Almost, I said. I was not thinking about the sample. I got it. We stayed there for a moment longer than necessary, both of us aware of it, neither of us moving, and then he helped me back to the ledge, and we climbed down without discussing what had just happened, because there was nothing to say that we were ready to say yet. That evening's treatment session was different. Not in anything he did. His hands were the same. Careful and professional, but in the quality of the silence between us, which had shifted into something that required more attention to maintain. How does that feel? He said, hands at my lower back. Better, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. His hands stilled for just a moment, then continued, steady, professional. Good, he said. The storm came in week 4, fast and indifferent the way desert storms are, and grounded us in the supply tent for 14 hours, me and Cal, the others having made it to the larger equipment shelter before the sky closed down. We sat on opposite sides of a supply crate at first. By hour 3, we were side by side, backs against a stack of equipment cases, shoulders touching, the sound of the storm enormous around us. He'd made coffee on the camp stove somehow, which felt like a small miracle, and we drank it and talked and let the storm do what it wanted outside. He told me about the bad year, not in detail. Cal was not a person who led with detail, but in outline, the shape of it. A deployment that had gone wrong, people he'd been responsible for, the particular weight of carrying something you can't put down because putting it down feels like a betrayal of what it cost. You keep moving so you don't have to feel the weight of it, I said. He looked at me. You said that about yourself, he said. Week 1, at the camp stove. I know, I said. I recognized it in you later. He was quiet for a long moment. The storm pressed against the tent walls with a sound like the world rearranging itself. I don't know how to put it down, he said. I've tried. Maybe you don't put it down, I said. Maybe you just reorganize around it. New patterns. Different but stable. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Open. Unguarded, the careful composure briefly aside. You're using my geology against me, he said. Your geology now, I said. You said you liked it. He almost smiled. The storm went on outside, and neither of us moved to put more distance between us, and the tent was warm and small, and full of the particular intimacy of two people who have been paying close attention to each other for a long time, finally sitting still in the same space. His hand found mine in the dark between us. Not dramatic, just certain. I turned my hand over and held back. The last morning, he did my final treatment assessment in the medical tent with the early light coming through the canvas, and the camp already beginning to break down around us. His hands moved across my back one last time, checking, assessing, thorough in the way he'd always been. I sat very still and let myself feel the full weight of what it meant, that this was the last time, that in 3 hours I'd be in a truck heading back toward the world. You're good, he said. Structurally sound. High praise, I said. His hands rested at my shoulders for a moment, just a moment. Warm and certain, before he stepped back. I stood and turned around. He was looking at me with the same undefended expression from the storm, and I thought, this is what he looks like when he's not managing anything, when he's just here. I'm going to be back in this region in the fall, I said. Different project, different site. How different? He said. About 40 miles south of here, I said. Give or take. He nodded slowly. That's not very far, he said. No, I said. It isn't. We looked at each other in the early light, and neither of us said the thing that didn't need saying, because we were both people who had learned to read what was underneath the surface. And the surface was already telling us everything. I drove out of camp at 8 in the morning with his field jacket around my shoulders because the morning was cold and he'd put it there without asking, and I hadn't given it back. 40 miles south of camp, I pulled over and looked out at the desert, at the exposed rock faces and the fault lines running through them, visible from a distance if you knew how to look. The permanent record of every break and shift and reorganization. I picked up my phone. No service, of course. I opened my notes app instead and typed what I would send him when I had signal, which I did not overthink and did not edit. The jacket smells like the camp stove. I'm keeping it until fall. I put the truck back in drive. The desert went on in every direction, indifferent and ancient and full of evidence that broken things find new ways to hold. I drove toward the signal and didn't look back because I didn't need to. I already knew the geology. Mature audience is 18 plus. All characters are adults. This story contains emotionally intimate content.